Hi there, welcome to Coaching Reflections. I'm Andrew Matthews, and this is
Alex van Oostrian. Hi.
Hi, Alex. You were going to tell me something around feedback loops.
Yeah, so we've been discussing a little bit before starting to record, and we talked about how things that we don't necessarily want to happen end up happening. So we know what we don't want, and somehow things unfold in a way that ends up being a reality. So then I had an idea that feedback loops might be part of how that process happens, and I was about to explain my example. So if I have a problem to solve and my personal style of problem solving has a useful side to it and has a not so useful side to it, like any style of problem solving, that might, well, that's going to influence which direction that the problem solving goes in, and also how it unfolds. So my personal style of problem solving is the be perfect style. So I pay attention to detail, quality, standards. I really get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of stuff. So I can overcomplicate a problem because of that style, as opposed to somebody else who might put more value on time, like someone who has a hurry up problem solving style. They're not going to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of it. They're going to aim at completing the task or solving the problem as quickly as possible. But if you look at like holding those two problem solving styles in contrast with each other, they will both result in a problem being solved, maybe the same outcomes or slightly different outcomes, and maybe and very likely in different ways, but they can cause more problems which are an echo of the problem solving style. So the problems that I would cause would be getting bogged down in the detail, and what I would see feeding back in the feedback loop is more detail and overwhelm, which creates a greater problem. So it's kind of branching out like that. And if you look at the hurry up side, they would start putting themselves under time pressure, and they'd start getting flustered by the amount of time available, which is self-imposed, which is part of the feedback loop as well. So there are a number of different styles of problem solving, and if you borrow from transactional analysis, there's 5. There's the try hard, please people, be strong, be perfect, and hurry up. So what you could do is you could identify even you don't have to take a test. You can just kind of resonate with what seems like your way of getting around challenges, or if you notice there's a stressor or some kind of performance demand, where do you go to? How do you get around that? And then you could start to notice, what do you notice unfolding when you're trying to solve a problem that's part of a feedback loop that actually makes your own problem worse? That's about feedback loops. I'm wondering if any thoughts have come up for you, or
I'm struck by how so starting to imagine, it's interesting because I wasn't imagining a specific instance or example of me being stuck in a feedback loop, but I know how I feel when I'm in a feedback loop. And what struck me hearing you speak now was that how quickly the feedback can happen. and it's almost, I don't know if this is a thing, but I know I resonate for my own style, is that the more I push into that stressed behavior, the faster the feedback loop can happen. It like seems to speed up, like a train careening out of control.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you must have heard when people hold a microphone too close to the speaker, that cacophony that erupts happens so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And initially it does sound, you can hear the individual sounds, but then it gets closer and closer, and then it's just this terrible, seemingly to the human ear, a single terrible noise.
Yeah, I mean, it can break things if it gets too far. And it's interesting because it's such a beautiful metaphor to work with. Like the ways to stop it is you turn the mic off, where, you know, people put their hand over the mic. And I've seen so many people who aren't aware of it being a feedback loop unfolding. They get panicky and they actually make it worse. Or they don't interrupt the feedback loop. And I think it's a great metaphor for recognizing your own part, or one's own part, in feedback loops in relationships, and you know that those can be relationships towards a task or a problem or something internal or another person. And this is one thing that I think is useful both in coaching and supervision, but particularly supervision because we take more of a cognitive or psychologically minded approach to understanding the feedback loop, so we can recognize it as it's unfolding. It's like hearing those initial sounds, that whine starting to build up. Oh, okay, here's the feedback loop happening, and then already having a strategy of what to do in place of that.
Yeah, and I was also wondering, or starting to think about that and particularly in supervision, is recognizing that you could be, you as the supervisor, or the supervisee could be the initiator of the feedback loop. So the more you know yourself and your own tendencies of feedback loops, what's going to happen, what's your, to borrow from TA, like you said earlier, what's your drivers, or whatever modality you use, what do you recognize out of your own stressed behavior, so that you can recognize the warning signs, or that tone of noise coming through the speaker, to use that metaphor, and have an awareness of how to interrupt that feedback loop. Alternatively, if you don't recognize it, it's an indication that it's something coming from your client. And you might work with it differently or even the same.
I like where you're going with that. So if you're a feedback loop detector as a supervisor, you might be detecting your own stuff, your supervisee's stuff, or stuff emerging from the supervisee's environment, or the supervisee's client, or the client's environment.
Yeah.
More accurately. And you can interrupt and also model like the most appropriate response to that then in like a positive feedback loop. Interesting. So it's actually, it would be a negative feedback loop if you're using feedback loop jargon, but in terms of parallel process, it'll be positive parallel process.
Yeah, we're getting the mathematics of two negatives make a positive.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It'd be nice to map that out.
Yeah. What I'm enjoying is being able to talk about this from a meta perspective. So really is the distance. So that, sometimes you say, let's get onto the balcony and see what's happening. And I really do feel like being able to talk about it like this is like being on the balcony. You can see different role players when I imagine different scenarios. And I don't, being in this meta perspective, standing on this balcony, I can see it unfolding, but I'm not feeling my stressed responses kicking in. It's a nice feeling.
I like that image of standing in the balcony, and another one that came up for me is one can be like a scientist observing what's going on with more clarity because you're not subjected to the process of whatever it is that's going on. And I think that's the space that that supervision invites both supervisee and supervisor into. It's to be scientists in having had or having a subjective experience, and then being able to observe that experience in reflection or in reference to something, to make it less subjective, or maybe that's not the best way of putting it, to bring some objectivity to it. Enough objectivity to make sense of it. Yeah, what do you think?
I read something yesterday, and I loved this phrase. It's being able to take off the glasses and being able to look at the glasses. So it's the lenses that you see through life that may get you caught up into those feedback loops, but it's the opportunity to take off the glasses and actually look with different eyes what's happening, but you also are able to look at the lenses and critique where it may have the picture become distorted.
That's a great metaphor for that.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have to say about feedback loops for now.
Okay. I was trying to listen out if there was something else echoing through that needed to be said, but I'm not picking up anything. No.
No, me either. Well, help us get to the 1 million subscriber mark. Like, share, subscribe, comment.
Did you say 100 million?
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Thanks for correcting me.
Oh, I'm not sure. I was trying to correct you. I was checking.
Okay.
But anyway, yes, like, share, subscribe. Everything helps. And let us know in the comments what comes up for you when you think about feedback loops and what other questions might be bubbling up from that.
See you next time.